All right, hey guys, this is Mrs. Colson and we are going over the rules with decimals. So we're going to start at the top of our notes with addition, and we're going to follow these steps in order to add these two decimals together. So first we need to find our decimals, and then we need to line those decimals up when we're adding them. And we're going to set this up just like we would any other addition problem. So I'm going to do 12.5 plus 9.74. And I lined up my decimals just like it told me to. It says line up the decimals. Next step says fill in the empty spots with 0. So here's an empty spot right here. I'm going to fill that in with a 0. 0.5 is the same thing as 0.50. If we're thinking about money, that's half of $1. Now we're going to go ahead and add this just like we normally would. Don't worry about the decimal yet. We'll put that back in at the end. 0 plus 4 is 4. 7 plus 5, that is 12. Carry the 1. 9 plus 2 is 11. Add 1 more, that's 12. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Last step, bring down the decimal in your answer. So my decimal's right here. I'm going to bring it down to right here in my answer. And then we are done. The answer to this problem is 22.24. So just our simple rules for adding decimals. Now let's slide over to subtracting decimals. Again, we need to find our decimals and then we have to line them up. So when I set this problem up, I am going to line up my decimal just like I would when I was adding. 18.7 minus 11.23 or 23 hundredths. Then I'm going to fill in any zeros, and I'm going to subtract like I normally would. So I cannot take 3 away from 0. 0 minus 3. I can't do that. There's not enough there to subtract, so I need to borrow from my neighbor. I'm going to borrow 10 from them. Now I have 10. 10 minus 3 is 7. 6 minus 2, that's 4. Don't worry about the decimals yet. 8 minus 1, that's 7. 1 minus 1, that's 0. Now my last step after I subtract is bring down the decimal in your answer. So I'm going to bring down that decimal point, and my answer is 7.47. Okay. Sliding over to multiplication now. So addition and subtraction are very similar. We need to line up our decimals. Very important that we do this part right here. Line up those decimals and then to bring the decimal down in our answers. So for multiplication, it's a little different. We have a little bit more steps. So first, the number with the most digits goes on top. So we see that this first number has the most digits, so it's going to go on top. The decimals do not have to line up. Very important you remember this with multiplication. They do not have to line up. So then once we get that number with the most digits on top and we set up our multiplication problem, we are just going to multiply like normal. Then we're going to count, after we multiply, we're going to count how many places in the first number the decimal is moved over. Then we'll count how many places in the second number the decimal has moved over. This is how many places you will move the decimal in your answer. So now that we know our steps, let's go ahead and work this out. We set up our multiplication problem so that the number with the most digits is on top, and we're just going to start multiplying. 0 times 5 is 0. 5 times 3, that's 15, carry the 1. 5 times 4, Well, 5 times 4 is 20, plus 1 more is 21. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 more, that's 7. Okay, so we already multiplied with our hundredths place. Now let's move over to our tenths place. So I'm going to put a 0 here. I already multiplied with my hundredths place. I'm going to hold that place. I like to bubble it in to know that I'm holding that place value. Now I'm doing my tenths place. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 3 is 15. So that's 5. Carry the 1. We already used this one, so I'm going to cross it out. 5 times 4, that's 20, plus 1 is 21. Carry the 2. Very good. 5 times 2 is 10. Or 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 more is 7. So now I'm going to add those. Add the zeros here. 0 plus 0 is 0. 5 plus 0 is 5. 1 plus 5 is 6. 7 plus 1 is 8. And then my 7, I don't have anything to add up here, so it's just a 7. So we just multiplied. We didn't have to worry about those decimals. Remember, we don't have to line them up. But at the very end, we need to count how many places in the first number the decimal moves. So if I count here, it's 1, 2, 3. So 3 places. And here it's 1, 2. 2 places. Now when I add these together, that tells me how many places over I need to move this decimal. So it's starting all the way over here at the right, and I need to move it over a total of 5 places. So I'm going to move this decimal point over 5 times, 5 place values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now my decimal is all the way over here. So rewrite your answer out. 7, 8, 6, 5, 0, and let's circle our answer so we know that that is our answer. All right, our last rule that we are going to review is dividing. So division with decimals. So our first step says the divisor cannot have a decimal. So what that means is we need to move the divisor decimal so that it is a whole number. So here's our divisor to remind us. We cannot have a decimal here, so we need to move it over to the right so that it makes it a whole number. Then we're going to move the same amount of places in our dividend. The dividend is underneath our line right here. Place a decimal straight up where you write your answer and then rewrite the problem to divide. Okay, so let's move this decimal place over because we cannot have a decimal in our divisor. So I need to move it to the right. Now it's over here. I had to move it 1 time, so that's how many times I move it in my dividend. I'm going to move it over 1 time. I moved it over right here. That's where it's going to be in my answer. Now we don't have to worry about that decimal anymore. We know where it's going to be in our answer. It's there. Now we can just divide like we normally would. It says divide like normal. So now this is not 0.4, it's now 4. So I'm thinking, can 4 go into 2? 4 cannot go into 2, so I'm going to put a 0 there. Can 4 go into 28? 4 can go into 28. We know it definitely can. Now we have to think, how many times can 4 go into 28? Well, 4 can go into 28 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. I'm going to subtract. I get 0 and 0. I still have this 5 up here, so I need to bring this 5 down. Now I need to look. Can 4 go into 5. 4 can go into 5 one time. 1 times 4 is 4. I'm going to subtract. I get a 1. Can 4 go into 1? No, it can't. When that happens, we need to add a 0 and bring it all the way down. So I bring that 0 all the way down. Now I look, can 4 go into 10? 4 can go into 10. 4, 8. It can go into it 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. Gonna subtract again. I get a 2. Well, 4 can't go into 2. So I need to add another 0 and bring another 0 down. Can 4 go into 20? Yes, it can. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. It can go into it 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. When I subtract those, I get 0. When I get 0, I know I'm done. So our answer here is 7.125. So that is a quick review on our rules on decimals for addition and subtraction. Remember, you do have to line up your decimals. For multiplication, you don't. You just have to count how many places over that decimal is and then do that to your answer. And then for division, you have to move your decimal over in your divisor and then do the same thing in your dividend over here. Wherever it ends up here is where it ends up in your answer. Okay, now that we've reviewed the rules with decimals, you need to get your composition notebook out and you are going to glue those rules to page number 14. So you're going to put those all the way on page number 14. So if you're looking at your composition notebook, that is going to go on page number 14. You're going to glue that right in to page number 14. Okay? Now, on page number 15, we are going to need to set this up just like this one set up, with a big, nice, long, straight line down and straight line across. So what do I mean by that? Well, we are going to do a line straight down and straight across through the middle so that we set this up and do 4 sections. Okay, so you can see the big picture here. Okay, so now that we did that, now we are going to review. You see my daughter's Mickey Mouse coloring book. Let me put this underneath it. Okay, now that we did that and we reviewed our information on rules with decimals, now we're going to add in some positive and negative rational numbers. So for addition, this section is going to be addition. This section is subtraction. Then we have our multiplication. Ooh, and our division. So each section represents something. We are going to follow those exact same rules. The only difference is we are also going to have to follow all those rules that we've learned about positive and negative integers, and we're going to apply those to our decimals. So here's our first problem. We have negative 5.6 plus negative 4.2. So let's think about how we would look at this if this was just an addition problem with integers. I notice my signs are the same. When the signs are the same, we keep the signs the same. So we know our answer is going to be negative. We keep the signs the same and we add our absolute values. The absolute value of negative 5.6 is 5.6. The absolute value of 4.2, negative 4.2 is 4.2. And we're adding these decimals. So that means we have to line up our decimals. And then we just add them. 6 plus 2 is 8. 5 plus 4 is 9. Then we bring our decimal point down. So we have 9.8, and we already identified, hey, our signs were the same, so we have to keep the signs the same. Our answer for this is negative 9.8. Remember, anytime we have a negative number and we're adding more negatives to it, our negative is getting bigger. It's getting further away from 0. So when you see a problem where it's decimals and you have positive or negative numbers, you just need to remember those rules that we've already learned about. So for addition, when the signs are the same, you keep the sign the same, you add the absolute values. If the signs were different, then you would just find the difference. We wouldn't have added these, we would have subtracted them. And then we would have had to look, do we have more positives or more negatives? All right, so let's look at an example for subtraction. Let's say we have negative 1.5 minus negative 3.2. Well, as soon as I see subtraction, I know that I need to do KISS. Keep it, switch it, switch it. So I'm going to rewrite this. Keep it, switch the subtraction sign to addition, and switch our second number to its opposite. So instead of negative 3.2, we're going to do positive 3.2. Now that I rewrote my problem, I need to look, are my signs the same or are they different? Well, this one's negative and this one's positive. So they're different. When they're different, we have to find the difference. We have to find the difference between our absolute values. So in order to find the difference, I always need to subtract my smaller number from my larger number. So I'm going to set this up with the larger number on top, and I'm going to subtract the smaller number from it. Remember, with subtraction, with decimals, we have to line up our decimals. So now that I have this set up, I need to just start subtracting like I normally would. 2 minus 5. Well, I can't do that. I need to borrow. Now I have 12 minus 5. 12 minus 5 is 7. 2 minus 1 is 1. And for subtraction and addition, you just bring that decimal point down. So for my answer, I have 1.7. Now I have to look back at my original problem and see, do I have more negatives or more positives? I have more positives. So I am all done. I have a positive answer, 1.7. Okay, following our same rules with decimals, this time we are looking at multiplication. So my problem is negative 2.7 times 5.3. And remember, anytime we have a number outside of our parentheses, that means these are multiplying here. So I'm going to follow my rules for multiplication. It says that, remember, the most digits goes on top. Well, they both have the same amount of digits, the same amount of place values. So, and the decimals do not need to line up. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this up as 2.7 times 5.3. I'm going to start multiplying just like I would. 3 times 7. 3 times 7 is 21. I'm going to carry the 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Plus 2 more is 8. Now I just did my tens place, and so I'm going to hold that place value. Now I'm going over here to my ones place. 5 times 7 is 35. I have to carry the 3. I already used this 2, so I'm going to cross it out. 5 times 2, that's 10, plus 3 more, that's 13. I'm going to add these two numbers together. 1 plus 0 is 1. 8 plus 5, that's 13. Carry the 1. 3 plus 1, that's 4. And 1, we don't have anything to add to it, so that's just 1. So now we're done with all that multiplication. Now we need to look at our place values up here. We have to count. How many places over is our decimal? So here, it's 1 place. Here, it's 1 place. So that's a total of 2 places over. So we always start on the right. We're going to move our decimal over 2 places. 1, 2. So I have 14.31. Now let's look. Is this going to be positive or negative? A negative times a positive is always a negative. If you had a hard time remembering that rule, remember you could do the triangle. We had a negative times a positive. So I'm going to cover up 1 negative and 1 positive. And you see I'm left with a negative in my triangle. So that lets me know that my answer is going to be negative as well. All right, our last problem is a division problem. So we have negative 1.35 divided by 0.5. And we are going to solve this. So we're going to set up our division problem. Negative 1.35 divided by 0.5. So 0.5 is our divisor. $1.35 is our dividend. Now remember, we cannot have a decimal in our divisor according to our rules. So we need to move this over to get rid of that decimal. We moved it over 1 place in our divisor, so we need to move it over 1 place in our dividend. And that's where it's going to be in our answer. So now that we did all that, we don't have to worry about that decimal anymore. Now we can just divide like we normally would. Can 5 go into 0? No, 5 can't go into 0. And if you need to rewrite this out so that you can see it a little bit better, after you do all the moving with the decimals, you can rewrite it if you need to, okay? Always a good idea to rewrite. So I'm going to start just dividing with this here. So 5 can't go into 1, so that's 0. Can 5 go into 13? Yes, it can. It can go into it 2 times. 5 times 2 is 10. Now we have to subtract. 13 minus 10, that's 3. And we need to bring down that 5. We can't leave it hanging up there. How many times can 5 go into 35? Well, it can go into it 7 times. 7 times 5 is 35. Gonna subtract, and I have nothing left over. So that lets me know that I'm done dividing here. So my answer is 2.7. Now don't make a silly little mistake. You need to look and figure out, hey, is this a positive 2.7 or a negative 2.7? So if we look up here, we have a negative times a positive. When the signs are different, our answer is always negative. So we have negative 2.7. Also, you can use that triangle again to figure that out. We have a negative times a positive. So I'm going to cover up 1 negative and 1 positive, and that tells me that my answer is going to be negative. So I know it's negative 2.7. Okay, I hope that this helps you guys out with understanding how to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Make sure that you understand how to do them without the positives and negatives before you start working on the positives and negatives. You should be working on your quizzes after this. Don't forget to get this page glued into your composition notebook. And remember, this page is on page 14. This is on page 15. That's where we should have been writing that. Okay? I will see you guys soon. Bye.